look at where we are today as citizens, the condition of the country is always a reflection of we the people and what we ourselves know about the Constitution. There are so many things that are out there, constitutional myths. We the people, by and large, do not know our Constitution very well. It's worth reading every single year. It takes about 20 minutes to do it. That's what will turn the country around, is we the people knowing that document and using that document.
Welcome back to the program where we're spending an hour talking about the Constitution. Was the Constitution a pro-slavery document? How about the truth about the 3/5 clause?
Frederick Douglass actually was very upset at our founders because he said, I'm not just 3/5 of a human being, I'm a full human being. This is an argument that is used even today that Frederick Douglass corrected.
Yes.
Tell me the story.
What happened was, after he escaped in 1838, he ended up in New York. In New York, he gets discipled by a lot of anti-slavery folks, and that's the Lysander Spooners and Gerrit Smith and William Lloyd Garrison, etc. And Massachusetts Society hears him do his testimony, and they said, oh man, you got to speak for us. Well, in the meantime, they're saying, you know, you need to overthrow the Constitution because the Constitution is a slavery document. The founders gave us slavery in the document, and there's all these clauses of slavery. And he believed that. But bless his heart, when the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society said, we want to pay you to go on the road full time, he said, okay, I got to make sure I know this stuff. So he sat down and read the Constitution for himself, not just what the guys had taught him. He read it himself, and he read the documents surrounding it, the debates going around it. And he comes out with this epiphany and says, this is a great anti-slavery document. And he says, every clause in it. You go, whoa, time out. How can the 3/5 clause be an anti-slavery clause? Real easy. He read the convention notes. What happened was you had all these anti-slavery founding fathers. You had, for example, James Wilson. You had Elbridge Sherry. You had Luther Martin.
Ben Franklin.
All these guys, all these anti-slavery guys. And you had three hardcore southern states that were pro-slavery. There's Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. And so the Constitution says every 30,000 inhabitants you have, you get a representative to the House of Representatives. And in South Carolina and Georgia, there's more blacks than there are whites, and they're slaves. And they said, great, every 30,000 slaves we've got, we'll get another member of Congress. Guys up north said, no, 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 we're not doing that. If you want to count them, you free them. Every free person you have, you can get 30,000. You can have, and they said, no, no, we're going to count this, or we're not going to be part of these United States. So this debate goes back and forth. And what's really funny is the guys in the South said, you know, blacks are property. I love
they're not people.
They're not people,
but they want to count them as people.
And see, the guys in the North said, no, every black is equal to a white. We're all created equal. You get 30,000 free blacks, you get a member of Congress. And that was the incentive to free blacks. It was, you get to count them for Congress. So the guys up north started having fun with the guys down south. They said, you know, you guys say that blacks are property. And Elbridge Gerry did this, and Luther Martin did it out of Maryland. They said, okay, here's what we're going to do up north. Is you're counting 30,000 pieces of property, get a member of Congress. We're going to count 30,000 chairs and horses and cows. We'll count our property. Every 30,000 piece of property we get an anti-slavery member to Congress. So they went back and forth on this thing, and what they finally ended up was the 3/5 clause that says, okay, we will count 3/5 of the slave population, not individuals, which meant you now had to have 50,000 before you could get a pro-slavery rep to Congress. The 3/5 clause cut the slavery representation in Congress in half. And when Frederick Douglass read that, he said, the 3/5 clause, that has nothing to do with the worth. That has to do with the representation. It makes it harder to get a pro-slavery representative in Congress. The Constitution's an anti-slavery document. And it was.
Another myth to set straight is regarding who fathered the Constitution.
Today, we like to say Madison's the father of the Constitution, but that really is not an accurate statement. Now, Madison had an influence, no question about it, and he's really the scribe of the convention. He wrote everything down. But Madison very wisely made a statement back as an older man. People were looking at him and said, man, you must have had a remarkable influence in the Constitution. He said, no. He said, you can't look at this document as being the result of one head or one mind. This was the result of many heads and many minds. You've also got folks like Roger Sherman, who came up with the whole bicameral concept where we have a House and a Senate. One represents the states, one represents the people. That dual interest, and that was a big deal for them because they said, you know, electing a president, this is not a good deal because we have 13 colonies, but there's enough people in Massachusetts, and there's enough people in New York and Pennsylvania. Those 3 states can get together and elect the president. The other 10 colonies, we got nothing to say over it. So they didn't like this thing of just the population doing it, but they didn't like the thing of just the states doing it because they wanted the people to have a voice. So Roger Sherman comes up with the bicameral concept, and by the way, that's the basis of the electoral college system, which is such a cool system. People don't understand it today, but the president, if he only had to be elected by the people, he would never leave the East Coast or the West Coast. He'd start up at Seattle and go down to Portland. He'd go down to the Oakland area in San Francisco and go down to LA and San Diego. And he'd pop over to Miami and come up and hit all the big cities, and that's more than 50% of the population. He would never visit the inland part of America. But because the electoral college says, wait a minute, states get a voice too, now the president has to go to Iowa, and he has to go to New Hampshire, and he has to go to Nevada, and all these other places to get votes that he would never have to get. So that's Roger Sherman. That's a really cool part. You also have James Wilson, who's called a master builder of the Constitution. He was actually the second most active member at the Constitutional Convention. Spoke at the floor of the convention 168 times. He was an original justice on the Supreme Court once we ratified the Constitution. He's a big voice. Charles Pinckney out of South Carolina. He had more winning proposals than any other member of the Constitutional Convention, but nobody ever hears of Charles Pinckney. And you really have to look at the Constitution as a result of all of them.
Next, to understand the Constitution, you have to go back to the Declaration of Independence.
The Constitution is really born out of the Declaration of Independence. You have no clue of understanding the Constitution if you don't have a good grasp on the Declaration. 85 words right up top that give you 5 fundamental principles of American government. Those five thoughts are real simple. The first one says, hey, we believe there's a creator. We in government believe that. Number 2, we believe that the creator gives certain specific guaranteed and alienable rights to man. And number 3, we believe that government exists to protect those specific rights. They say now below that there is a moral law. They call it the laws of nature. Nature's God, 8 words out of the Declaration that came from a law book of the day. That's the 4th point. And then they say below that moral law, we have the consent of the governed. So those 5 specific things, you take those 5 points and move them over to the Constitution, and now you start understanding the Constitution.
Welcome back to our hour-long special on the Constitution. This past summer, lawmakers went back to the Declaration of Independence when questioning then Supreme Court nominee Elena Kagan. They evoked the Declaration to get her views on the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Listen to her answers.
Senator Coburn, to be honest with you, I don't have a view of what are natural rights independent of the Constitution. And my job as a justice will be to enforce and defend the Constitution and other laws of the United States.
So you wouldn't embrace what the Declaration of Independence says, that we have certain God-given inalienable rights that aren't given in the Constitution, that they're ours alone, and that the government doesn't give those to us?
Senator Coburn, I believe that the Constitution is an extraordinary document. And I'm not saying I do not believe that there are rights pre-existing the Constitution and the laws. But my job as a justice is to enforce the Constitution and the laws.
Well, I understand that. Well, I'm not talking about as a justice. I'm talking about Elena Kagan. What do you believe? Are there inalienable rights for us? Do you believe that?
Senator Coburn, I think that the question of what I believe as to what people's rights are outside the Constitution and the laws, that you should not want me to act in any way on the basis of such a belief.
I would want you to always act on the basis of a belief of what our Declaration of Independence says.
Now let's watch as our own president is now omitting words from the Declaration. The president has given a speech where he's used a quote from the Declaration of Independence. He has omitted, I believe, the most vital part of the quote, and nobody understands why. This is not a small deal, and I want to explain. First, let me show you what he said the first time on September 15th. Here he is.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Endowed by their Creator. And
endowed with certain inalienable rights, life and liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, the glaring omission there is the one word, Creator. Okay, after we, and I'm sure others, brought it up, the White House insisted the comment was made on the fly. It was inadvertent. It wasn't in a teleprompter. Okay. The White House Deputy Press Secretary Josh Ernst talked about the incident, and he said that, quote, "The president is in full agreement with the Declaration of Independence. Any suggestion to the contrary is just silly." Well, it's not. Woodrow Wilson said the Declaration of Independence was meaningless. So why is it silly now that this president, especially when he leaves out a very important word? It has nothing to do with religion, by the way. I want you to know that. We gave him the benefit of the doubt, except 7 days later, the president again, while speaking at a Democratic fundraiser, omitted the one word creator when referencing the exact same passage from the Declaration. The omission was part of a prepared transcript. Now, they didn't have any cameras at this dinner, so we had to go to the White House and get the transcript. Here is the White House transcript on what the president said. Quote, "If we believe that all people are created equal and everyone is endowed with certain inalienable rights, then we are going to make sure those words live." But he goes on, but it's pretty clear that this isn't being done on the fly. Or else there's a speechwriter at the White House that needs to be selling vacuum cleaners door to door. I'm just saying. This is not some sort of oversight. And here's why I feel compelled to talk to you about this tonight. The mail I get from people who are even on the right who say, "Oh, just shut up about your religion, blah, blah." It's not religion. You must understand why every word was put in the Declaration. It is a very big deal. It is one of our critical founding principles that we do not get our rights from man. We get them from God. Why is that important? In the Declaration, they were very careful to make sure it wasn't Christian God or Jesus or Moses or anybody else. It was nature's God and nature's law. Why? Because they wanted to make it as broad as they could, but make sure that everyone understood it is from above that rights are endowed and they are unalienable, meaning they cannot be changed, they cannot be taken away. If God or the Creator is taken away, where do you get your rights from? If our rights come from other men, then men can take them back. This is about as fundamental of understanding of our liberty. It is essential. It is the reason I made such a big issue out of what Senator Tom Harkin said during the health care debate. Do you remember what he said? I think it was on Christmas Eve or something like that.
What this bill does is we finally take that step. As our leader said earlier, we take that step from health care as a privilege to health care as an inalienable right of every single American citizen.
Okay. Stop.
And as I've said before,
stop.
this bill does not...
Okay, look, Congress doesn't pass rights. They cannot pass rights. They cannot create a right. They pass laws. But this is an idea, a notion that permeates our government now. The rights our founders enumerated, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, have become instead the right to health care, right to a job, the right to a certain wage they deem decent, and the only way to provide those rights is to take your rights to the things you've earned. The problem is, these new rights were the rights outlined by Karl Marx and Engels, not our founding fathers. If that is the path we're going to take as Americans now, then let's have that discussion. Let's stop pretending that we're working from the same fundamental principles, because we are not. If the president, who is a constitutional scholar, if the president doesn't understand the critical word creator in the Declaration of Independence, we're not on the same page. And it has nothing to do with faith or God or anything else. It has everything to do with man seizing power. If you don't believe that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, which means you cannot ever change them, you cannot take them, don't pretend that you just forgot those three crucial words. Come out and tell the American people that you do not buy into the concept of rights coming from creators. Defend your true position. That's all I've been asking for, is you to do your own homework. Question me. Look all of this up. Look it all up, please, I beg you. It does nothing if you're just repeating what I say. Look it up yourself. Know it to be true. And then go to the battlefield of ideas and argue it out and fight it out on the battlefield of ideas. Let the people decide. Under those conditions, under those conditions, not in the cover of darkness or not with lies or smears, our chances are very good of winning, because I trust the American people, and so did our founders. Progressives don't. Back in a minute.